Welcome everybody. I'm Rabbi Chernitsky, director of Chabad Newfoundland. Instead of doing the Wednesday night Parsha class, we have the Thursday afternoon Parsha class. I was unavailable yesterday, which is code for I fell asleep and putting my son to bed. So we have a very cool Parsha class. So let's get right into it. So today's the last day of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, Chag Sameach. Freilich Hanukkah. This day is called Zois Hanukkah. This is Hanukkah. It's the chance to reach our potential. It's just like the menorah. We started with just one candle, one light, and last night was the 8th night. We lit 8 candles. We filled up the menorah. This is the concept of fulfilling our potential. That's why we went slowly. And this is one of the great lessons from Hanukkah, great lesson from today, the last day, to actualize your potential. And this is a lesson we take from Hanukkah, lasting us the whole year until next year Hanukkah, when we derive an even deeper lesson, as we know that time in Judaism is an upwards spiral. Not that it always is the same thing, but rather it goes up higher and higher and higher and higher. Okay, so Parshat Vayigash, we're getting to the end of the book of Genesis. Vayigash means that he approached, referring to Yehuda, Judah approaching Yosef. Joseph still did not reveal himself to his brothers. They think he's just the viceroy, the second to the king of Egypt. No, it's their brother. Joseph wants to take Benjamin as a slave, as a servant, because the goblet of Joseph was found in Benjamin's stuff. But today's class doesn't focus on the narrative directly, but on a lesson from the different verses in our parsha. The idea we're going to speak about today is very powerful. That is shortening suffering. Lekatzer sebel. Can you shorten your suffering? Everybody has a problem. Reminds me of somebody in Montreal I met a number of years ago. He says to me, he was in school and the principal rebuked him and he said to him, listen, Avi, everybody has a problem. Health, with the children, with the parnasa, with the livelihood. But you don't have a problem. You are the problem. Anyway. So everybody has a problem. Everybody has something they're struggling with. Unfortunately, some people more, some people less. And God should have mercy, and we should all just have it good. But that's not the way life works. There's always something that we're dealing with, something we're addressing. And we have a choice. As we're going to say today, we have a choice. Which type of struggle, toil do we want? Do we want the one that's brought upon us from external sources? Or do we want to take upon ourselves the toil of Torah study, which is not easy? Okay, take it from me. I've learned in yeshiva for many years, thank God. Torah study is not easy. And if we take upon ourselves the toil of Torah, then God removes from us the yoke, the toil of anything else. This is something that says clearly in Pirkei Avot. It's part of the Mishnah, part of the oral tradition, the ethics of the fathers. Pirkei Avot, it says that whoever takes upon himself the yoke of the Torah will remove from him. It's removed from him the yoke of making a living. So this is the concept. Okay. The concept is, again, just these are different words I wrote down to express this idea that we have a choice. In other words, always has to be always keeping us busy, on our toes. Something has to be in our minds, engaging our minds, worrying us, bothering us. And we have a choice. Whether it's going to be something that's external, something we didn't choose to come upon us, or we could choose a sweeter, more comfortable, more pleasant type of toil, type of yoke, and that is the yoke in Torah study. Why do we have challenges in life? To stop and make us think, what is life really about? Right? It's a big robotic, just going to work and taking the kids and bringing the kids and eating supper and going to bed. Why am I here for? What's my purpose in life? I'm not just here to eat and drink and have the latest iPhone and drive the Tesla and have a huge house. We're here for a purpose. What is that purpose? So sometimes when we're lost, God has to send us a curved ball to remind us of what we are doing here. So we have a choice. We could either be playing with that curveball that we didn't choose, that we didn't want, or we could choose our own curveball. We could choose our own toil in Torah study and say, this is why you, God, put me to this world. You don't need to send me a curveball to remind me what my priorities should be. You don't need to remind me where my mind should be. You don't need to remind me what I should be doing, because I'm going to take the initiative and do this thing. I'm going to take upon myself to study Torah every day, set time, set amount perhaps, and this is my priority in life, and that's it. And how is this connected to the parsha? It's connected to the parsha because we know that the Jews were, it was decreed by God, as God told Abraham in the covenant between the parts, Bris Ben Abesarim. God told Abraham that your descendants, the Jewish people, will be enslaved in a land that's not theirs. They're going to be enslaved in Egypt for 430 years. Now, not all of the years were years of slavery, as we know, because in our parsha, it's when the Jewish people go down, and the slavery only began after the last of the 12 sons of Jacob passed away. So you'll be surprised that the number of years of actual slavery was 86. There was still some control over the Jews for 116 years, which includes those 86. So it's like a 30-year extension there. But so out of 430, even if you go with the number 116, 116, it's less than a third. Did I say that right? Yes, it's in a third. So not all of the years did they suffer. So how could it be? God decreed it's going to be 430 years of shivud, of bondage, of slavery. The answer is, as we said before, that the Jewish people were smart. They built a yeshiva in Egypt, a house of study, and so they fulfilled that part of the decree through toiling in study, by enslaving, so to speak, dedicating themselves to the Torah. And so the physical slavery only began afterwards. When the new generation came about, the generation thought they were very smart. They said, life is good, let's make it better. We want to have more money, they're going to build in business. They stopped studying, and God brought upon them the actual physical slavery to fulfill the decree. Before the decree was fulfilled by Torah study, they stopped studying, so God brought upon them the decree in the, I don't know, was it the literal way or the most basic way. And this is what happened to the Jewish people. Go through my notes here. We're covering good ground. Now, this is the only parsha that has no end. Okay? Usually between parshas in the Torah, there's some sort of break. It's called Pesucha or Stuma. Here, however, at the end of Vayigash, before the beginning of the next parsha, Vayechi, there is no such space. There's different types of spaces. We're not going to get into that now. But there is no such space. And if it was not for our tradition from Ezra, we would not know that this is two separate parshas, because again, there is no space between them, as we do find between all the other parshas of the Torah. Why is that? So Rashi addresses it at the beginning of next week's parsha, the beginning of Vayechi. Rashi says there's no space between the end of Vayigash and the beginning of Vayechi. And Rashi says because in Nistat Mo'ena, once the Jews understood they're going to exile, going to Egypt, where the process of exile will begin, their eyes were closed. They felt hopeless. And the idea is that already in our parsha, the seeds for exile are planted, right? Jacob and his sons move from the land of Israel to Egypt. It's a descent physically, as we're taught that the land of Israel is the highest of all the lands. That's when somebody moves to Israel, it's called Aliyah. Aliyah means to go up. And when somebody leaves Israel, it's called Yerida, going down. because Israel is, in a certain way, the highest of all the lands. Okay, so this is the beginning of the exile from the end of our parsha, towards the end of the parsha, where Jacob and his children go down to Egypt, until Sefer Yehoshua, until the book of Joshua. The Jewish people do not go back to the land of Israel. So this is a couple hundred years, right? So we said it's the 430 years, which is really 210. We're going to speak about that soon. 210 plus the 40 years of wandering in the desert. So it's roughly 250 years between leaving the land of Israel and the Jewish people going back with Joshua, Yeshua. Now, the Meshech Chochmah, one of the great commentaries, one of the great Achronim, he says something interesting. He says, we find that God appears to Jacob at night. Now, all the Jewish prophets, God appeared to them by day. Only Bilam, right, the wicked Gentile prophet, God appears to him at night. So, says the Meshech Chochmah, why is that by Jacob the Torah emphasizes that God appeared to him at night? And he answers, because Jacob is the only one that could lighten up the darkness. We had a class on this last year, where Jacob instituted the might of the night prayers. Jacob is the only one that could, so to speak, bring God, reveal God in a place that's dark and God is not apparent, where God is not seen, where God is hidden. Jacob is the one to do that. Jacob suffered tremendously. He kept putting one foot in front of the other. And that is the idea. David, when it's dark spiritually, we don't see God, we don't feel God, we feel lonely, we feel like the world's a jungle, that it's just orderless and anybody could do whatever they want. As you see the beginning of that movie, the Mechanical Orange, I think it's the Clockwork Orange. Jacob comes in and says, no, God is in charge. As the Lubavitcher Rebbe said so many times, the world is not a jungle. And the Rebbe quoted, Yishbala Baisa Didazu, there is an order to this castle. Things are not just happenstance. Nothing happens for coincidence. God is the one that's leading the world and God is good. This is the essence of Judaism. And this is an idea that we have from Jacob. The whole essence of Jacob is to illuminate the dark, to show that Hashem is with us even when it's dark and everything seems chaotic and there is no light. Interesting thing related to this thought is that the Talmud says, the Gemara says in Brachos, in Tractate Brachos, that Ma'ariv, the night prayers, are technically reshus. It's optional. It's not obligatory. But the Jewish people took it upon themselves as a choivas, an obligation. Why? Why not with the morning prayers or afternoon prayers? Shachris Mincha. So there's a beautiful explanation. I don't know the source. There's a beautiful explanation that nighttime, it's dark. We don't see God. We don't want to establish as a fixed thing a prayer at night. We want to God to be revealed at night. We don't want to have to cry out at night because we don't see God. We had no choice, so we established it as an obligation, but really it's not an obligation because we didn't want to put into the status quo to cry out at night, to say, God, where are you? God, help us when it's dark, when we don't see, when we don't feel, when things are tough. It's just a consequence of life. So what we were saying before, it's about the number of years the Jews were in Egypt. If you ask someone, how long were the Jews in Egypt? You're going to get different answers, and they're all more or less accurate because it depends how you count and what's the perspective. There's a number 430, there's a number 400, there's a number 210, there's the number 116, and the number 86. We mentioned most of them in this class already. God told Abraham the Jews are going to be enslaved for 430 years in a foreign land. So what we say Passover by night in the Agada is that God had mercy, and He shortened the time and counted it from the birth of Isaac, because we say when the Jews were not in the land that's theirs, that's counted with the 430 years. How many years were the Jews actually in Egypt? 210 years. 210 years. And how many of these years were years of actual bondage, slavery, suffering? So the two numbers, 86, and then the 116, which is 30 more years. Okay. We said, how do we know that all 210 years in Egypt were not years of suffering? Because Rashi tells us that until the last one of the sons of Jacob died, there was no slavery. Okay. A beautiful thing that's brought down by the Shach al HaTorah. Shach al HaTorah was a student of the Arizal, and he says that if you look at the Torah, Torah sometimes says Mitzrayim, Egypt, and sometimes says Eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt. So he says, if you look carefully, the 430 years doesn't say it was in the land of Egypt, it says Egypt. What's the difference? Egypt, this is the mentality, the knowing that the Jews were going to be in Egypt. That was already the beginning of the slavery. That was already the beginning of the exile, right? If you know you're going to go to jail, God forbid, the person knows they're going to go to jail. If a person knows that they're going to go to surgery, when does the surgery begin? Before they put him to sleep with anesthesia? No, the surgery begins with the guy, whatever, a week or two before. You're already nervous, thinking what's going to be, and planning and organizing and all worried. So the same thing since Shach al HaTorah. Already from when everyone heard after God told Abraham we're going to be enslaved for 430 years, that's when the Egypt inside the mind of the Jews began, that fear of the exile, and that's what we count from there. That's what he says. Another idea connected to this from our parsha is that now that Joseph reveals himself to the brothers, he sends gifts to his father Jacob and tells the brothers to bring Jacob to Egypt. What does he send to his father? Rashi brings two things. Either that he sent him old wine, or he sent him crushed beans, Gilson Shapul, which is very unusual things for somebody who hasn't seen his father in 22 years. Needless to say, his father didn't even know he was alive. So the Chido, one of the great Sephardi Chachamim, Sephardi rabbis, Chaim Yitzchak David Azula, he writes that it was all a hint. The wine he sent him is a wine of consolation, because Yayin Yashan, if you take the Gematria numerical value of old wine in Hebrew, Yayin Yashan is 430 years. Right? Because Joseph knew that though his father is going to be happy to see Joseph, he's going to be distraught to leave Israel and go into the Egyptian exile, which we already know his grandfather Abraham got the prophecy. Yosef was saying, you need to appreciate that we could have gone into exile in chains, God forbid, but you're going down like a king. Wine is an important drink. But he said to him, don't worry, it's not going to be as bad. Because he also sent him crushed beans, right? Pul garus in Hebrew. Hashem is going to crush the full amount of years, right? Yain Yashan, old wine, was 430. So he says, don't worry, it's going to be crushed like the beans. Because pul, beans, has the numerical value of 116, which is the full amount of years of slavery, of exile, of suffering. That's going to be all out of the 430. Going back to how we started, though, we say, well, God decreed 430 years. It's 430 years of exile. What happened to this? God doesn't change his mind. We said, well, the Jews were smart and they opened a yeshiva, a house of study, and with the Torah study, that's how they fulfilled God's decree of slavery and didn't have to be enslaved physically. They chose the yoke of the Torah. Now, finish with this idea. The Abarbanel, one of the great, also Sephardi rabbis, he's earlier though. Abarbanel is the 15th century. He was actually the treasurer for King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in Spain. That's how much he liked him, and they offered him to stay in Spain despite the Inquisition. They liked him so much, they offered him to stay and live as a full-fledged Jew. He didn't have to convert. But he refused and he left together with his community. What a match. So besides being the treasurer, he was a prolific writer. Wrote a beautiful commentary on the whole Tanakh, all the 24 books of Tanakh, Hebrew Bible. And on the Haggadah, he writes a number of questions. So he writes, how could it be that the whole Jewish people are punished with this covenant between the parts that they're going to be enslaved for 430 years? And he gives many answers. One of the answers is that it was not a punishment. Right? He says that it was a preparation. It was a way to refine the Jewish people. It's a preparation for the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, which happened, right, 49 days, after the Exodus, after they left Egypt. Just like precious gold, after it's mined from the ground, is covered with dirt, is covered with garbage, it's sometimes covered with other metals which are not as precious. And what do we do with gold? You have to put it in a crucible that's thousands of degrees hot, so that those metals fall away, and the gold is refined, and you could sell it, you could make it into jewelry. So too with Egypt, the Torah in many different verses calls Egypt the Kur HaBarzel, like the iron crucible. Again, the point is the refinement of the metal. And so too, the whole point of the slavery in Egypt was to prepare the Jewish people for the giving of the Torah, to refine them. So just like, because all of us, we have gold inside of us, but we also have ego. We also are selfish. We're also narcissistic. We're also self-centered. And so sometimes we need to get the ball from above to, again, help us focus and see what's important. What am I supposed to be doing? I'm supposed to be helping others, thinking about others, not just thinking about myself. The ganzen Tag, the whole day. We'll finish with a story with the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim was a great prolific rabbi. He wrote the Mishnah Brura commentary in the Code of Jewish Law. He wrote the famous treatise on Lashon Hara, on the loss of gossip. And he said, somebody came to him and he complained that he said he's very wealthy. And he had set up a system that from 6 to 7 every night, he would write checks to people that needed it. Checks for charity. So he says, I'm getting old. I don't have the energy to do it anymore. Can I hire a gabbai? Can I hire an assistant to do it? I'm going to keep on giving some amounts of money. But instead of me doing it, I'll hire someone else to do it for me. So the Chofetz Chaim said, we find in Tehillim and Psalms, in chapter 23, King David says, Ach toiv v'chesed defuni kol mei chayai. Only kindness and mercy, toiv v'chesed, the goodness and kindness should chase me all the days of my life. Says the Chofetz Chaim, this is a very unusual expression. Goodness and kindness, they don't chase you. You say, I should have goodness and kindness, something like that, but what do you mean they were chasing me? So he explained the Chofetz Chaim, he said, listen, there's always something chasing you. And you have a choice. It could be, God forbid, not good things, or it could be goodness and kindness. Choose goodness and kindness. Hope you enjoy the class. Again, this is Rabbi Chernitsky, director of Chabad Newfoundland and the Friendship Circle. Lovely to be with you today. Tune in next Wednesday night for the Wednesday night Parsha class unless it gets moved. Then it becomes this some other day Parsha class. Shabbat Shalom.